Hi artists! Before we get started today, let's review sketching. Sketching is using our pencil lightly to create a drawing. Sketching is easier to erase than when we draw very hard or with a lot of pressure on our paper. So I am going to move my hand back on my pencil a little bit, and I am going to create some lines using less pressure. I'm being a lot more gentle or softer with my pencil. You can see here, I've tried to erase those dark lines, and it doesn't really work very well. If I've been sketching or drawing very lightly, it's much easier to erase our lines. Remember, you also have large erasers in the boxes on your table. I am going to start in the middle of my paper. I'm going to sketch or draw lightly with a zigzag or sort of a craggy line to represent my mountains. This is not a perfect up and down zigzag where I have big pointy triangles. It's more flowing and freeform. I am looking for the top of my mountain peaks. It looks like in my drawing I have 4 of them. I'm going to use my pencil to start at that peak or the top of that mountain. I'm going to come down with that wiggly or zigzag line and then back across to the other mountain peak. So again, I'm starting at the top of my mountain, coming down and across to the other mountain peak. This is going to give me an area to create a shadow. So I am trying to make my mountains look more three-dimensional. I need the mountain face or the front, and then this area is more of the back of the mountain. Here I am going to use my pencil to make some short diagonal lines on that back side of the mountain. These lines are called hatching, and they help to create a shadow or some value. So they're showing the light and the dark spaces in my artwork. I am pretending that the sun is coming from the right side of my paper, so the shadows are all going to be on the left side of my mountains. Now that the general shape of my mountains is done, I am going to add some little lines and spaces for some texture on the mountain faces. So I'm creating some organic shapes with my pencil, and then filling them in with a little bit of hatching to create a shadow. This might be where you could hike through a little valley or another little detail on the mountain's face. Now that I've created my background, I'm going to focus on the middle ground and the foreground. I'm going to create a horizon line that goes across my paper from one side to the other. It's not a straight line, it's showing the texture of the land. I'm going to create a couple of other little hills that will be in the foreground or the front of my artwork. So foreground, background, and then we have some things that we could place in the middle ground. These trees are going to be big because they are closer to me. The closer things are, the bigger they appear. As we go back in the distance, something like a tree, if we want it to be realistic, is going to be getting smaller and smaller as it moves back on your paper. I don't want to put a giant tree on top of my mountain. That would not be realistic because my mountains are definitely bigger than my trees in real life. Here I am just making a vertical line up and down, and then I am using horizontal lines to go back and forth and create some trees. This tree is more of a deciduous tree, so I'm using Y shapes to create some of the branches. If you would like to add a river or a path or a road in your artwork, that would be a great detail. But we need to remember our perspective. If something is closer, it is bigger. and it will get smaller as it goes farther away. So my road or my river is actually disappearing into those mountains as it goes back in the distance. This is where you can get creative, artists. You get to decide what sort of details are in your landscape. So you could have things like trees, animals, buildings. It's really up to you. Some friends have already decided that they would like to have things up in the sky, like rocket ships or shooting stars. It's really up to you. Here I am just working on filling in my foreground and my middle ground, since my background of the mountains is already done. Now I'm going to use some different size Sharpies to trace and make my lines nice and bold. I'm going to use this fine point Sharpie or the middle size Sharpie to go over those large mountain lines in the background. I am going to use the ultra fine or the smallest Sharpie to go over the little details. Now that I have traced with my Sharpie, I'm going to take my large eraser, using my helper hand to hold down my paper, and I'm going to erase any pencil lines that I don't need anymore. When we add color to our artwork, I would like you to focus on analogous colors. Those are colors that sit next to each other on the color wheel. They are colors that are similar, not opposite. Colors like blue and orange are opposite or complementary colors, and when they mix together, they make a muddy brown. Let's have an example. Here I am using an orange watercolor pencil just to show you what it looks like. Then I'm going to add some blue next to it. I know that blue and orange are opposite or complementary colors. When I add water to the watercolor pencil, and I blend those two colors together, it's making a really muddy brown. Now let's try analogous colors, or colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. I am going to take some magenta or some pink, and I'm going to use that first. Again, this is just an example to show you how these colors are going to blend together. I'm going to use a little bit of orange next to that, and then I am going to move on and I'm going to add a little bit of yellow at the end. When I blend these colors together, they are going to work well together and they're going to blend nicely from one to the other. They are not going to make muddy brown like the orange and the blue did. I've chosen to use warm colors for my sky in my artwork. So I am going to start with red. I'm going to press a little bit harder so it's a little bit darker down near my mountains, and then color lightly towards the end where I'm going to add some pink right next to it. I'm going to fill the next section of my paper with pink and then move on to some orange and yellow, because those are all warm colors that are analogous or next to each other on the color wheel. The next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of water to the watercolor pencil. This will help me blend all of my colors together. Watercolor pencil acts just like regular watercolors when you get it wet. So I am going to go back and forth. I'm going to pick up that color with my brush, and I'm going to start moving from one color to the next to blend them together and create my sunset or my sunrise in the sky. Once my artwork is dry, I am going to work on adding final details with these paint pens. Give it a little bit of a shake to activate the pen, and then you might have to press down. You can try this out on your placemat to get the paint really rolling in there. You can see that the white looks a little bit more like snow on my sunset background. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stick with that snowy theme, and I'm going to cover my background with some little snowflakes. If you have a background that is more cool colors like blues and purples, you might want to try out the silver pen to make some stars or some shooting stars in the sky. You get to decide because you are the artist. Have fun with your artwork, artists, and be creative.